Hello again. The Practical Animal channel is for you if you want to know what it takes to work with animals. From alpaca farming to zoo consulting, I aim to cover it all. I do this by every week interviewing an animal industry professional, asking him or her what are the skills that they needed to be successful in their career. My name is John Beaumont, and I have degrees in field biology, conservation biology, and veterinary medicine. I've also worked on some of the highest profile conservation projects in the world. All of this enables me to ask questions that get to the heart of how to be successful working with animals. I ask the questions, and you can use them for job interviews. And also, if you are a student of English as a foreign language, the listening material is going to be useful for you. My next guest is Ryan Trousdale, President of the Arizona Trappers Association. Listen to the end for information on an entirely new animal industry I've never covered before on this channel. Please consider subscribing so I can grow the channel. And throughout the video, you can see pieces from my own films on the wildlife of Northern England, as I believe a closer connection to wildlife enhances all of our lives. Please share the video with anyone you know who wants to work with animals. Is climate change affecting animal behaviour and distribution? Ryan, why does somebody become a trapper? What is the goal?
Okay, well, I'll speak from my perspective here, especially in the United States. It starts out as an extension of another sporting outlet. It might be connected with fishing, hunting, photography. It could be connected with conservation. Some folks who are even a little older than you and I, it started with their fathers and grandfathers in the rural parts of America. And they did it for meat, depredation, and furs. That's usually why they started it. And that would be in the 1940s and 50s.
Do trappers have a philosophy as such, Ryan?
They're very selective on what they take and what they release. Also, the science of trapping has evolved rapidly, even in the last 10 years. There's a lot of behavioral sciences and a lot of physical sciences. What constitutes an attractant, what constitutes a lure, what constitutes a bait, what constitute behavior around the trap. Here we're dealing quite a bit with the coyote, the fox. We're dealing quite a bit with the bobcat. We have quite a bit of encounter with badgers. In each one of those species, what's been happening is more and more of the populations are centering around mankind. We're not seeing them in the wilds like we used to, and specifically that's because of global warming and drought. They simply can't survive. So what's happening is they're moving into the more rural areas, semi-rural and semi-industrialized areas, and they're learning to adapt. They're born there. And they're eating everything from crops all the way to trash. So we have a completely different animal.
Climate change is having an effect already on animal distribution and behaviour.
Oh, it's a huge difference. There's been a migration from trapping in the wild to trapping in agriculture. We here in the United States have had something similar to what you've had in Europe called, you have the mad cow disease over there that has popped up. We don't have mad cow, but what we do have over here is E. coli 157, which is spread through feces in the fields. And we have lost lives from our crops being sent out to grocery stores and people become very ill, feverish, severe diarrhea, kidney damage, all from bacteria in our crops. Probably the source of that is through either wild animals or domestic animals. So we have strict laws now that have just cropped up in the last 5 or 8 years. Absolutely no animals in the fields, nothing. Oh, hay and alfalfa, soybean, corn, doesn't make any difference because the bacteria seemingly do not collect in those stalky plants, but they will collect out of the irrigation water, and they'll collect between the leaves of the leafy greens. Those guys that are not trapping in the wild anymore for commercial pelts, they've all moved to depredation trapping. And some of them are making good money at it.
Ryan, can you just clarify what is depredation trapping, please?
An individual on a farm who wants no animals in their field, so they'll employ you for most of the year. Even though the larger animals are not getting into your food sources, the smaller ones are. So they'll hire trappers like us to come in there and clear any of the larger animals out, depending on what may be protected or not protected by your wildlife people. And again, these are in industrial areas. And they'll have us come in, set cage traps, set footholds, whatever they have to do, and whatever your indigenous species are in the area. And to be sure you have them, they could be weasels, they could be any kind of a fur bearer, and they'll pay us to keep them out of the factory properties. And some of those properties are huge. Some of them are 500 and 700 acres, and they have storage lots. So that would be an idea of depredation trapping.
There's at least two kinds of trapping. There's depredation trapping. There's commercial trapping for pelts. What other kind of trapping is there, Ryan, in Arizona?
Hobby trapping. We'll have folks that trap and they take pictures of everything and then let them go. The art in trapping actually is learning habitat, tracking. It's the game of hunting that's most satisfying. The kill is not always the big part of hunting animals. A lot of times it's just the hunting.
Ryan, what species are trapped?
Fur bearers in general, by definition, of course, are mammal fur bearers. The bobcat, the coyote, and the fox. Those are the big three. Or there's another facet of trapping too, and that's for government trapping specifically. We have done studies. I was involved in the E. coli 157 study where I had to remove the intestines, the lower intestines, out of everything that I caught. We turned it in to the Center for Disease Control. They would analyze it, and they're hunting for E. coli. That program came to a halt because COVID hit. Then they started studying COVID, and as you know or may not know, they found COVID in mink. So what happened there, the mink farming came to a halt all over all over the world because there was a problem with mink carrying COVID. Now, whether or not it was communicable to man, I don't know, but a big scientific study on that. So there may be a trapping project, usually grant money, to trap mink in the wild. We know what existed in the farms. There may be money, and there was money on our Indian reservations here at one time for rabies, to check fox and coyote for carrying rabies. And we found it. There were rabies in the high country. So there's a whole facet of trapping there for scientific purposes only. And obviously, if there was an animal that was trapped and was infected, then you destroy the animal and dispose of the body. One of the things that are taboo in this country is to trap something and then relocate it. We do not do that. At first look, you cannot tell if an animal's got mange or rabies, or if they have a tuberculosis, infectious disease of some kind. Can't tell. So our wildlife model is to not relocate them unless you've had a mandate or permission from the wildlife agencies.
Is it possible to be a full-time trapper all year round?
Yes, it is. I would say through commercial trapping and depredation trapping, yes.
So how does the trapper's year look, Ryan? I mean, in most animal industries, there's certain things that happen at certain times of year.
Back in the Midwest and in the eastern part of the United States, most of those guys carry jobs during the summertime. They'll be in construction work, they'll be truck drivers, whatever. And then when the winter snow hits, they can't build anything and they can't drive anywhere. So they hit the trap line and they'll trap hard from about October through about March. You will see the biggest, most prime furs coming out of Montana, Idaho, and Colorado. That's where the prime cat pelts are coming out of. Those are the pelts that are worth the money as far as the commercial trappers go.
Ryan, how does somebody take up trapping? I mean, what licenses do they need? Do they have to learn it from their father and grandfather? How can they start?
Yeah, that's a fair question too. Every state in our union has a wildlife agency of some kind. There are two methods to become licensed. You can take an international test over the internet, and it's a book on ethics, it's a book on trapping methods, and it's a book on equipment. So they discourage a lot of homemade trapping equipment that will either damage the animal, or if you catch something that's not a target and you need to release it, we want to make sure that that animal is released unharmed. So we use approved equipment. That's what you learn either over the internet or in one of our classes. We teach them here in Arizona. Every state teaches them. And when I mention we're an educational body, that's what we do here with the Arizona Trappers Association. We try to reach out to men, women, and children, train them. We administer their examination, and then they get a certificate. And when they present that certificate to the Game and Fish Agency in our state, they get a trapping number that stays with them the rest of their life. And that trapping number gets engraved or tagged onto all of their equipment.
Ryan, how did your own career as a trapper develop, please?
I was asked by Game and Fish to help the farmers with the organic vegetables and fruits. They had an epidemic of the E. coli. They have my number, my trapping number, and they had seen me and talked to me in the field a little bit. They asked me to come in. And also the University of Arizona was doing a water test in our canal from the Colorado River. They were doing water testing. And I gave them my card. We ran across each other in the field one day while they were doing water testing in the canals, and their professors called me, and they had a $5 million grant, and they needed all kinds of animals. So they asked me if I would volunteer, because I was not on the original budget, if I would volunteer to trap animals for them, since I was in the field anyway, and that the following year they would promise to get me some money. And I agreed, and I trapped for a while, and then the next thing I know, COVID broke out, and the whole program lost all their money to go to COVID financing, which was fine, because one thing that I think that comes up on the ethics is human beings are first. Human beings have to be first. And I know how I feel about my domestic pets and about the wild animals. I love them all dearly, but my wife and my children come first before the animals.
That's really interesting. For somebody watching this whose ethics are completely at odds, they may be saying, gosh, how can he say that? Can you explain a little bit more about your attitude towards your domestic pets and the wild animals? How would you describe your connection with those two categories?
You get to the heart and the soul of it now. There are actually two or three different answers. I'll tell you the ones that I've heard, then I'll tell you the one that I subscribe to. Number one problem with trapping, hunting, fishing, all of it is the euthanasia part. That's where the main divide is. There is a large group of people that don't want to see the animals or the fish or anything killed at all for any reason. They feel that it's unethical. On the other side of that spectrum is a group of people who believe in the religious interpretation that God gave us the world, God gave us man, and God gave us the environment to eat from. And they will eat what they kill. And some folks, like in the Indian reservations, they actually have ceremonies to this very day around what they kill and give thanks for it. Still, you're not going to reach the people who don't believe in killing. So there's a dividing line right down the middle between those two groups. There's another group of people that hunt and kill strictly for pleasure. And it's kind of like the hunter-gatherer syndrome in human being. You're going to find people that like to farm. And you're going to find people that like to hunt. And they'll do it and they'll trade with each other. The farmer will give crops to the hunter, and the hunter will give deer to the farmers. And that goes back for eons. Then you're going to find the kind of hunter that I disagree with, or the trapper, and that is to have something in your personality where you have to be in command over the top of something. So they're not legally or ethically or morally able to command themselves over other people, so they command themselves over animals. And they seek some kind of a joy and control over that. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, that's where I support the environmentalist. There's no need to have that personality, and there's no need to be that way over animals. So when you get into the domestic animal and you train that animal to be as human-like as possible, as respectful and as endearing, nurturing as a human being, then we have what Cleopatra had with her cats. A complete keen love for them, and they were domesticated. So I don't know if she started domestication in cats, but I have a cat and I have a dog and I love them dearly, and I would do nothing to hurt them. But a bobcat in the wild, to me, is a completely different game for some reason. If that bobcat is carrying disease, he's out of here. If that bobcat has maybe a pelt that I would like to harvest, then I'm not going to decimate an entire population just to get one pelt. I'm going to take one pelt and I'm going to let everything else go. So in my mind, there's always a community of animals there that I would hope are living a healthy environment, because they're not overpopulated and they're not underpopulated. And I take the direction from the biologists from my game and fish and wildlife associations to tell me what I should be harvesting and how many I should be harvesting, and to respect those numbers. So that's the three different ways that I look at it. If you get into trapping quickly and you're really devoted to it, there is a large investment curve up front. Most trappers don't do that. They'll start out with a dozen traps, and then one day they wake up and they've got 144 foothold traps, and they maybe have 60 or 70 cages. And when you start setting that many traps, you are a full-time trapper.
How would you describe the trapping industry today?
Right now, what's obsolescing us all is fuel prices. We've been spoiled by fuel prices for our vehicles here for decades. And when our fuel went from $3 a gallon to $7 a gallon, that brought the trappers home. Most of the trapping that I see and hear of now in the commercial and depredation trapping is it's very specialized and it's very local. There might be somebody trapping beaver in a particular area because of the damage that it's doing to the trees and the backwaters that it's building. So they'll send a beaver trapper in there. When you're commercial trapping, your best day is not to catch anything, because that tells you that you've got the beavers out of that commercial lot or that commercial pond. Now it might be a drinking water pond, and you've done your job. You've got the beavers out of there, but you don't leave them, because if you do, there'll be 200 beavers there tomorrow night. Whenever you, and as your experience is in wildlife, whenever you clear a wildlife area out, it's virgin territory. Everything else will swamp right back in there.
Ryan, how do you see trapping changing over the next 10 years?
The lures and baits have gotten incredibly effective. That's where we're heading for in the future, is more effective scientific means of attracting the animals. Why do you want to do that? You want to keep the number of traps down, and you want to keep your costs down.
Ryan, what advice can you give to somebody wanting to take up trapping?
Read, and then arrange a ride along, or go to the trapping school, or in our trapping magazines, which are listed on our website, ArizonaTrappersAssociation.com, under the more information page. All of the magazines are there, and all of the state associations in our Western United States are there, and you can get a ride along. And what you're going to want to do is ride with somebody for a few weeks or whatever, and you're going to see the very real part of it. There is a real part of it too. I've seen, and I think in some of your videos, you've been in the outback before. You get bit, you get stung, you get cold, you get wet, you get hungry, you get hurt, you get mad, you get happy, you can't sleep, you get people steal your stuff, you miss your flight connections, you get all that. Trapping will bring all that to you too. You have to be a student in order to really either make money on this or to love it and be part of it. And there will be setbacks. You have to learn to deal with the setbacks.
What makes a successful trapper?
There's the really smart guy, the really resourceful, intelligent guy. He's not going to catch any more animals than the idiot, but the idiot's been doing it for 45 years, and you probably need to listen to him because he's tuned into it like an Indian. I mean, when he sees tracks, when he sees trail, when he smells something, he's on it. And the scientific guy does the same thing. But the guy on the high end and low end of the spectrum are usually the guys that get hired to do disease studies or crop depredations or some very interesting projects. And they may have an opportunity to go anywhere in the world. You can't have a squeamish stomach. You're going to be covered in blood when you do it. When you get a bioinfection of some kind of a predator, you have no choice but to clean them out. And you can go ahead and trap them and relocate them. And all you're doing is relocating that problem somewhere else. So I would say to you, you have to be able to make quick, clean kills and live with it. Some folks can't kill anything. When you put a beautiful woman in a beautiful fur coat, man, there's nothing like it. And they do that to get attention. They do that to show their wealth. And, if you don't believe in wealth or you don't believe in attractiveness, then of course it's the wrong game for you. But there are people that do revere that and consider that beautiful. And those countries do wear those garments and they consider them beautiful and they will pay for them. I've been hunting and fishing my whole life. And the first time I ever trapped, I caught what's known as a kit fox. They're known as a swift fox, very small little fox. I caught it in a cage. I was so excited I couldn't breathe. I mean, I could not breathe. I was so excited. And it's been a long time since anything's excited me like that. And this was a long time ago. And it was like I had trapped the Queen of Sheba. I mean, I just couldn't believe my eyes. And I was so enthralled with it that I was hooked the first time I ever trapped an animal. Now, if I would have had a different attitude, like, oh yeah, well, that's pretty cool, that was fine, then you shouldn't start trapping.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
We do have another facet kind of related to trapping, and it's called bird hazing. And a lot of times when a trapper goes on the line, and I've done this before, I'll check my traps in the morning. After I get my lines set up, those traps will stay in there on the farms, usually for a whole season. I might move them around once in a while. But we have a lot of migratory birds coming from Canada and places like that down through the fields, and they land in the fields and they defecate in the fields also. And that's enough to get an infection going right there, just in the irrigation water. So what a hazer is authorized to do is they can shoot shotguns at them with no pellets. It just makes noise. And they walk around the fields all day and they get paid for that. We also have what we call propane cannons. You'll have a propane tank and it'll leak propane very slowly into a cannon, and then a spark will go off and it'll make a large boom. And they run those 24 hours a day. We also have bird hazers that are up on tripods and they run on automobile batteries, and they have game they make game noises out of recordings. They'll make the noise of a hawk or a falcon screaming. And those screaming hawks and falcons will scare the migratory birds away also. There's an entire profession in what I've just described to you that is and can be quite lucrative, and you may never set a trap in your life. You just wind up being a bird hazer.
How do trappers conserve animals?
Okay. I just got something in the mail today when I asked you to wait for an hour. I was on my way home on the highway, and our Arizona Game and Fish Agency is changing the whole nature of their outlook to the public because they're losing too. They're issuing us the permits to kill these animals, whether it's trapping, hunting, fishing, I don't care what it is. Well, you go out with a fishing pole, there's limits on the amount of fish you can catch. Well, to the public, that's just a license to kill and they're getting money for it. And the Game and Fish says, no, that's not what we do. We are conservation based, conserve and protect. So this is the image that Game and Fish in our state is putting out there now, and they're quite serious about it. They're not interested in slaughtering animals. That's their image, that's our image, and that's the image they want me to take on as the president of the Trappers Association here in Arizona. They want me on board with these concepts. What they don't know is I've been on board with it for 10 years. To me, that's the good ethical approach to working with the animals and working with the public and working with conservation, disease control.
Ryan, it's been absolutely fascinating. I could talk to you all night. Sadly, if I do, that might result in divorce. However, I'd like to say thank you very much indeed for being on the Practical Animal channel, Ryan Trousdale.
You're welcome. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.